Okay. I just want to add something. It was quite interesting when we began the group. It was obviously detransitioners. I'll explain just now. But what ended up happening a couple of months ago was kind of strange. People that are trans came through the Beyond Trans site to get our support. So I had a couple of people contact me, and you never know if they're trolling us or if it's sincere, but a couple of them followed up. They had a couple of sessions with me. They didn't join the group because that's, to join the group, you've got to kind of be vetted. Kind of there's a little process that I do to make sure that groups can get quite complicated. So, and some of these people were living as trans, and they said to me, the reason we approached you, there were 3 different people that did this. So it's very specific that I'm talking about. The reason they approached us and ended up with me is they wanted non-affirming therapy. So they came to Genspect, to Beyond Trans, and to kind of preemptively the support group, but that's not where they ended up, because they wanted non-affirming therapy. They just wanted to be able to trust that I wasn't going to be sycophantic and just bow down to the trans god. So I did some really, really interesting work with those people, and they've moved on. So I wanted to point that out, that as Stella said, we did sort of clarify that it's going to be about life beyond transition, and that's going to be whether you're detransitioning, desisting, or whatever. So right, let me get started. So I'm going to start with, somebody else did it yesterday, I think, and I was like, good idea. The take-home message. Okay, I'm going to start with that because I want you to see in the rest of the stuff that I'm going to show you what I'm actually focusing on. So there's an understanding that I'm really trying to advocate for is the sex-based motivations, okay, because that exists with all of us. When you understand sex-based motivations, it's kind of like what Julie Bindel was saying earlier. The lesbians and the gay men are totally different, and that's a little bit what I'm hinting at here as well, that I ended up with a male detransitioners group and a female detransitioners group because they are so different. Initially, it was mixed. The other point I want to highlight is at the LGB, and I know other people have said this isn't original, but I want to highlight it, is the LGB are motivated by libido, okay? And I know everyone squirms when I say that word. I'm talking about it in its sort of original sense, which is life energy. It happens to be the best way to measure that is how sexual you are, but there's other ways of doing that. You can be creative, you can be sporty, you can be whatever. But in a psychological concept, TQ plus are not motivated by libido. Okay, we can start arguing about AGP and all that. I'm not getting into that, okay? But the reason I feel this is important is because it triggers the failed executive function. Everyone's concerned about executive function with the trans population. If you understand this, you can reverse engineer it, okay? And I'm not going to get into that right now. But if you understand it, this triggers a failed executive function, existential anxiety, which is I work with existentialism, so I'm going to talk about that a bit more. And depending on the sex, it'll be fear of failure or fear of vulnerability. And I'll show you later why I come out with that from what the group has said. And then I think we need to understand that a lot of them in the support group have been concerned about narcissism because they have a lot of guilt and shame. And then when they start working through the guilt and shame, they start understanding that they were sort of in a narcissistic phase. So narcissism as a maladaptive coping strategy, which is kind of what Jaco van Zyl was saying, I don't know where he is, was saying yesterday as well. And then I'm going to talk about self-determination theory just now, but the need to develop the core STT skills, which I think are so important. You'll see why just now. Connecting with personal values, very important. Maybe I should just slip in here that the family needs to understand personal values. The family has to have family values. I'm not saying what they are, I'm just saying the family has to have a coherent idea of what their values are, okay? Because the child won't, if you don't give them the values, they're going to go find them somewhere else, okay, especially if they're young and online. And then I'm going to try and convey something about helping families inoculate children against ideology, how values lead to intrinsic motivation, how this can reduce avoidance and anxiety, and that those specific words are going to come up just now as well. I'm going to try and convey an idea about, this is risky because with the detransitioners, you'll get some of them that won't agree with this, but my group discussed this. And I'm not sure if it was my idea or their idea, but we discussed that detransition doesn't seem to really describe what's happening. Transcendence, to me, and I do like using the word because I think we need to understand that we're all trying to transcend the human condition, okay? This is what transhumanism takes advantage of. But if we start thinking about people that are detransitioning are actually transcending, the term they don't like is anything related to going back. They don't like that term because it's not about going back to who you were before you transitioned. That's not particularly helpful. So I said, or someone said, well, maybe you're actually transcending who you are now, who you were then, who you were before you were trans. And that is in sort of as opposed to the victimology mindset, which is, of course, what they adopt when they transition. Right, so let me see if I can give you the results from this is sort of looking at the group. So I want to be clear about something. This is not a study. I know someone said it kind of is, but I don't think it is. Highlights of these are highlights of a qualitative report, which I'm going to show you a QR code later to the full report. And I really urge you to go and read that because I give you much more information and context and detailed quotes and that kind of thing. So please go to that. But it's highlights from the qualitative report from detransitioners support group meetings facilitated by me over 1 year. I want to be very clear about that. It's not me running a therapeutic group, it's a non-therapeutic group, and it's got a lot to do with life skills. Where did it go? Sorry. Yes, so some people might argue with me here, but there's no AGP in this group. What I mean by that is there's no obvious AGP. Okay, I think AGP does play a role. We're not talking about that today, please. And as Stella already said, this will include anyone that was harmed by gender-affirming care, and the group members do know that I'm doing this report. Okay, where are we here? Yeah, just a quick note, doesn't apply to all participants, and the things, I hope we can distinguish between the things that I'm saying and the things that the group said, which I did try to make clear, and they don't represent the opinions of me personally in the chart that I'm going to show you, or anyone involved with the project. I wanted to have an ethical approach. I'm just going to skip through this, but I just want you to know that I did want to develop an ethical approach. From the Kalani conference, I formally interviewed 9 different detransitioners, some of them kind of famous. Laura and I did thousands of hours doing Trans Psyche Pod, which was basically the beginning of this anyway, 2 years ago. But then I interviewed 9 others who were at the Genspect conference, and I also worked with Joe Burgo to develop sort of the outline of what I would do in this group, just to make sure that we weren't offering something that it wasn't, basically, you know. There's a couple of other details there, but I'm not going to get into that. So as I said, it was initially mixed, male, female. There was a sensitivity to trauma hierarchy, so I had to split the group at one stage. Some people have just done estrogen or testosterone. Other people have had all the surgeries. Okay, you actually can't put those people in the same group. It gets very complicated. And for me, it became obvious, and you'll see why just now. It became obvious why we needed to have the males and the females in different groups. As you can see, I'm more of a motivational person. I hope that's obvious. So the tone of the groups is very motivational, but there are times when we get very empathetic if something else is happening. But all of them return because they feel like it's motivational and supportive. Okay, I'm going to talk about the personal values just now again. Just as I said earlier, my approach, I said to Laura yesterday, I've technically been a qualified counsellor for the last 2 years. So I studied psychology in midlife. I was an entrepreneur for many years. But I've been an existentialist since I was born, I think. So if you understand existentialism, you'll understand everything I'm saying here. So I just said, you know, it's not a therapeutic group, but I have certain impact and influence. So I think it's important to understand. in existentialism, living authentically can only be achieved when one accepts who and what they are and pursues a life of purpose and meaning. Now, that sounds so obvious, but trans people are not doing that. They've gone completely in a different direction. They're getting their direction from someone else about their lives. So once you start breaking that down with them, they start understanding why they're so frustrated. So obviously there's, in existentialism, there's an awareness of the unlived life, and we sort of accept that people will delay, postpone, prevent having to take responsibility for genuine freedom, which in this case is very often basically adulthood. So they'll get very creative and apply all their IQ and creativity to deflecting that responsibility altogether, which of course doesn't work. As I said, self-determination theory. I'm not going to go through all of this. You can look it up. It's a very well-known theory. Competency, autonomy, and relatedness. Some people here know that I've go into a lot of detail about this, and I'll keep bringing you back to it because most people don't understand this. I've got a lot of clients, and when I talk about these things, these basic core competencies or skills or values or whatever you want to call them, they actually don't understand them. So autonomy is one of the most powerful predictors of mental health when you break it down. And then there's competencies which obviously are relevant to adolescence. And your relatedness was completely destroyed by the COVID lockdowns. So a lot of this will be relevant, even more relevant because of that. Okay, so the themes and patterns, which I think everyone's been waiting for. I need to explain, though, how we got to the themes and patterns, because it was a process. I'm not going to break this down too much, but the hero's journey is very well known, I think, in literature and I think in Jungian psychology. I chose this image in particular because it shows a spiral upwards. Often if you just Google this concept, it's a circle. I didn't really agree with that because you need to illustrate that there's an ascent to a higher plane. Okay, and then, let's check my time. Okay, time's good, because I want to break this down a little bit. The COVID period here had an impact, okay? If you see, there's the ordinary world at the top. This is basically where all of us live, and then there's the special world. But all of us, in different stages, will go from ordinary to the special world, sometimes for days, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. But with the trans crisis, the COVID period really initiated a lot of the as you can see there, it says online grooming. So instead of meeting the mentor at that first stage, what they meet, they go online looking for a mentor, and what do they find? They find grooming, okay? So now already, the whole process is being sabotaged. The magic elixir that I mentioned there, they all talk about estrogen and testosterone as being the entry ticket into the LGBTQ community. So if you want to be valued, you want to go into the special world, you have to take the magic elixir, okay? They were very emphatic about that, and they bring it up often. It's interesting because many of them will talk about when they detransitioned, and they refer to the period, the specific point when they stopped taking that elixir. So when you stop that elixir, you're actually going back, you're on the other end there, you're back on the road home, you're now the master of two worlds, and you're returning with special knowledge, okay? But obviously, as you can see here, the healthy way to do it is to enter this process knowingly. You recognize it as a journey. You go in and you seek a mentor. You seek healthy tests, allies, and enemies. You distinguish between allies and enemies. You challenge the shadow. Okay, the Jungians are getting all excited now. You challenge the shadow. So I'm going to talk about it in a second, but I spent 7 years as an anorexic when I was younger. Trust me, the shadow was a very skinny boy in the mirror who I never quite got to know, thank God. So I'm not going to break that down anymore because it does get a little bit complicated, but this is kind of what they're doing. And then once they understand this journey, the detransitioners really get on board, and it becomes more bearable. I'm going to mention just a quick, because this is how Laura and I met, the positive disintegration cycles that I mentioned there. That's Dabrowski's theory. Laura and I are like, yes, this is awesome. This fits into Dabrowski's theory. Positive disintegration cycles are about creative and intelligent people that he distinguished had overexcitabilities, and they had a tendency to experience positive disintegration cycles. When you look at the spiral, you understand that better. It becomes more visual. Positive disintegration cycles end with ascending to a higher plane, which is what we all are ultimately aiming for as an existentialist. This is what I believe. Worldview is really important as well. For the males, something called gamma bias is really important. I just want to point out that the two citations there, they don't talk about trans and detrans in particular, but that's why the little stars next to gamma bias and misunderstood feminism at the top. But the males would have experienced this bias of erasing positives of masculinity, which is a sort of cultural phenomenon that's been studied by those two guys. Intensified by the exposure to porn, usually, and I think the ones that deny it are lying probably. Unexplained shame of being male. It's not clear to them. They don't understand why they feel shame. So a lot of psychoeducation and emotional intelligence could help with that at an early age, I think. Trans ideology offers the relief, the therapist that they approach, the parents will go to a therapist. The reason why a lot of these therapists approached are affirming is because they're suffering from gamma bias. Okay, so I urge you to go and look up what gamma bias is so that you understand this properly. We kind of all have it, okay? Even I have it. Men will say something and we'll be like, what are his actual intentions, you know? And all of these things combine for them to feel like they're born in the wrong body. Then the females, they all identified as feminists before they transitioned. There was an impression that they all seem to have that men have more power, okay? So we need to think about that messaging. Confusion around misogyny. I'm saying confusion because it is confusion. When they talk about it, it's a discussion. I'm not saying that it is or isn't happening. There's a lot of empathy for males. This is something you need to be very aware of. Sometimes it's for the father, sometimes it's for a sibling, or sometimes it's just for their friends. A lot of them were tomboys, and again, born in the wrong body. The perception of being born. Oh, so whoa, hold on. Excessive use of marijuana seems to be common before and after trans ID. Now, I'm pretty sure some people here smoke weed. Guys, if you're sending a message to your children that smoking weed is okay, you're making a massive mistake. If you want to argue with me about this, come and meet me afterwards. I'll be happy to argue with you. I was very open to weed. I don't see it as a huge problem. But after talking to trans and detrans and my regular clients, when I get them off the weed, it's like a different person emerges within weeks, usually. So please, you cannot see the values of your life and your intrinsic motivation if you're sedating yourself. This is not complicated. So, okay, I'm not going to go on about that. It's a different talk on another day. So this is really what I've summarized it, because in the full report it's quite complicated because I wanted to give everything that they spoke about. But the males will have an experience. So this is the significant differences in transitioning. Okay. The male detransitioners spoke about having guilt and shame related to being bullied or being a bully. That's the very awkward moments that the males had in the one session where we all kind of like leaned back. And I had to confess that I've had that same experience. When I was younger, I was a bully, and later on I got bullied. Okay, I was the kid that was called a homo, and there's some South African terms, Yaku knows what they are, morphe and all that stuff. And of course I'm not, I'm actually straight, but I'm going to talk about that just now, about how I identified that the fear of being called homosexual or gay or some kind of slur will drive them to try and remedy that, even though they might not necessarily be actually gay. And then the shame and guilt with the females seems to come from being sexualized, victimized, or objectified, or all three in some cases, unfortunately. The trans ID, once they adopt the trans ID, the males gain tolerance, empathy, or status. Look at the difference there. The females gain safety, confidence, and or autonomy. So there's differences there. The males are always pursuing status. For the males, there was a fear of failure and narcissism during the trans process. So a lot of them are in one-on-one counseling with me to manage the narcissism. They're aware of it. I think it was Stephen Levine said that we have to acknowledge that a lot of them know they're lying, and I really agree with that. They do know. They admit it, they come to the support group because they were lying, and they know that very well. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And then the females had a fear of vulnerability and also narcissism during the trans process, which they try and remedy afterwards as well. The males needed to be needed. That's very well known, I think, in male psychology. And the females seem to need to belong. There seems to be a different need there that drives the behavior. For the males, the feminine persona was perceived to be more worthy of love. So there's some stuff here I know that's going to sound really weird to you, but I'm giving you feedback directly from them, okay? The masculine persona, there was a concept that kept coming up with the females about you need to be beautiful to be loved. That is often in conflict with being sexualized, victimized, and objectified, obviously, right? So there's lots of internal conflict. The males, as we saw in the Lost Boys documentary last night, the males aim to lower sex drive. This is unanimous, okay, with all of them, and feel more emotions. So in the, whatever you want to call it, the socially constructed masculine world, or whatever you want to call it, men are not allowed to feel emotions or not allowed to express them for whatever those reasons are. I'm not going to get into that. But they wanted to feel more emotions, and the females, they aimed to appear asexual and feel less emotions. So that there's the connection again with that confidence and autonomy. If you feel less emotions, you appear more confident, you appear more autonomous, which of course doesn't work, actually. Right, so how am I doing? I think I need to jump. This is where I spoke about transcendence. I just wanted to point out, like, the males, when they start detransitioning, they do look into better ways to be men. The females start feeling genuine emotions again. They reconnect with other females. Their quality of relationships improves. The males have renewed value in employment or career. So like Stephen Levine said, love and work. Look, it comes up there. You know, they need work. They need career, the males. There's some stuff that I could go on about that, just regarding the males. Just quickly, males will get a lot of their motivation and their sense of value from work. So we need to understand that the male who transitions is sabotaging a significant part of his basic drive, okay? Obviously, that can go horribly wrong when the man goes to work and he's one person at work and he's a different person at home, but that's a different story. So look at the differences with remorse and shame as well. The males admitted having remorse and shame for entered female spaces, okay? I want to admit, though, remember, this is a group that's been selected, so there's a selection bias going on here. I didn't survey all trans people, because you would get different results there. Maybe this is a good point for me to say, I think we should acknowledge there's a lot of sociopaths and psychopaths in this issue, generally speaking, from the doctors right down to some of the trans people. I think we just need to broaden the thing that we're talking about, because we all try to be very polite, but the fact is some of them are sociopaths and psychopaths, and we need to respond to them in that way. They are. They're dangerous. Down the road, for example. So several members contribute to Detrans Awareness Day 2024, so you can go find their videos on the YouTube page. Reasons for detransitioning, I think a lot of these are known. I'm not going to go into them. We're running out of time. But the shared reasons I think are important. Iatrogenic harm, adverse outcomes of medicalization. They wanted to have kids. I thought that was really interesting. One couple who both transitioned and detransitioned are going to weird lengths to have a kid. They want to get married. They're getting married in the next few weeks, and they are going to have a kid. It's quite inspiring, I must admit. They were lacking physical intimacy. They missed the physical intimacy. All of them were exhausted. All of them. Okay, so go back to libido. No libido, no life energy, no career, no executive function. Everything just collapses. Other life goals become more important, you think? So I want to leave some time for questions. Shared experiences, I'll just highlight go to the highlighted ones. I did want to point out, like I said earlier, not all of them are gay, but there is a homophobia nevertheless, okay? So I think Gary, I don't know where he is, but yesterday he said something about that. This thing's on. Yeah. All of them are groomed online. Sexuality resolves in detransition. The libido is revived. Yeah. I don't want to point out they confirmed they developed a persona deliberately, so they know, as Stephen Levine said, some of them lie. And they all agree transition ideology is a cult. They needed me to tell you that. They all agree that it is. This is just to show you how when they transition, they change their thinking. The females go from thoughts to behaviors to outcomes. The emotions are lost. The males, in transition, go from thoughts, emotions to behaviors and outcomes. The emotions are first. So this often, I think, will come across as if, I think it sometimes looks like autism, because the male is being emotional, he now has permission to be emotional first because of the estrogen, because of the way he's dressed or whatever. He thinks he's got permission to be emotional first, and I think a lot of that is acting, actually. Okay. Right, don't panic. Just quickly, you can go to this wheel in the report. As I said, the report's much more detailed, but the detransitioners, if you follow this wheel of values, which was in the study by Tunch et al. 2024, it shows you that growth anxiety-free gets achieved by those values that are in the center of the wheel. And then the transitioners will be pursuing the values at the bottom, and they end up with anxiety and avoidance. Okay, it's actually quite predictable, amazingly. And this is the values. This is just a summary of the values, the top 5 values. If I took all of them together and I averaged it, it was authenticity, health, security, trust, and freedom, which are wonderful growth values. Just quickly, that's actually who I am on Twitter. Everyone's very confused. My name is Vincent, but on Twitter, I used Vincent for a long time, and I don't like using my face on my Twitter profile because people make all sorts of stupid judgments. And I'm a registered professional counsellor in South Africa. I personally had experiences with suicide when I was 13, anorexia for 7 years. I struggled with masculinity as well. As I said last year at the other conference, when I saw the father emerging in the mirror, it completely terrified me. But I did spend 21 years as an entrepreneur and studied psychology later in life. I think I've said all that stuff already. If you're interested, I began actually talking about ideology. So Matthias and I have a lot in common because that was my focus, the ideology that's destroying my country, South Africa. All of it is the same woke stuff that we're seeing in the West. It's just they've changed the language. If you want to know more about that, you can go to my page. And I have spoken to a couple of groups. I was on Benjamin Boyce, and Laura and I did a podcast as well. I just wanted to thank the detransitioners who were involved, obviously everyone at Genspect, Stella O'Malley, and people who donate to keep the group running, and that's the link to the report. 2 minutes. I normally talk a lot more.